Alright. Is it weird to feel nostalgia about something that happened less than 4 years ago? Because that's kind of where I'm at with Genshin Impact. And I feel that it's definitely affecting my excitement for the new Natlan region. To give you some quick backstory, I started Genshin the day it launched, and that day I spent a full 18 hours playing the game. And the only reason that I stopped is because my PC literally blue screened and shut itself down. It was the first game of its type that I played because most of what I was playing at the time was Overwatch, which is a completely different genre of game entirely, and on top of that, I never played games like Breath of the Wild that Genshin took huge inspiration from. The only thing that I'd say is really even remotely close to that same ballpark is Minecraft, but Genshin was different. Playing Genshin for the first time was genuinely an eye-opening experience for me, and I couldn't tell you the last time that I had as much fun playing a game as I did in that 18-hour session. Everything felt fresh, it felt unique. No matter where I looked, there was something to do, a new sight to see, enemies to fight, characters to learn how to play. I mean, come on, this is when people were saying Diluc was the best DPS in the game, and that Zhongling's best weapon was the Crescent Pike. No one had any clue what they were doing. I was someone who believed the terrible tier lists back then that were saying Bennett was awful, and I even rolled C1 Venti thinking that DPS Venti was an actually viable option. The game was undoubtedly simple back then, but as I'm looking back with my admittedly rose-tinted glasses, I guess I'm kind of struggling to accept how much the game has also changed since then. See, it might have been simple, but I really can't say that it was worse off for it. The simplicity of wandering around a new area, seeing a camp of enemies, defeating that camp, and then getting an immediate reward for doing that we could use to upgrade our characters or our account in some way just felt special. And I think the fact that I was able to have an 18-hour session doing just that really speaks volumes to that point. Since that time, I feel the game has gotten more and more involved in some areas, but it's also stayed the same in others that hasn't really benefited it in either case. I think it became less about the simplistic and raw nature of just wandering around to see the sights and explore that got me to play for 18 hours, and more about driving the player to linearly complete different tasks. Really, I would say that started around the time Seirai Island released in Inazuma. To illustrate what I mean by linear task completion, let me walk you through the state of the game when that island released. This was the patch that the Raiden Shogun released, you know, the hot woman that pulls a sword out of her boobs. It was also the patch right after the main Inazuma region released, and everyone had just spent the last month and a half exploring the 3 starter islands. The first thing that a lot of players did after logging in when the patch was released was pull for Raiden. And then the second thing those players did was think, okay, how do I upgrade her? Upgrading Raiden wasn't actually that easy of a task, as unlike pretty much every previously released region, you couldn't just walk onto the island and grab the plants or the boss materials she needed to be upgraded. The island actually had a field around the center of it where all the materials were that the players had to do a full quest to get through without dying. And this right here is where I feel the game turned from explore wherever you want, do whatever you want, to do these specific things and only then can you do what you want. Everyone that wanted and then got the new character had to do things in the exact same order to actually use that new character. They would get the character, they would do the quest, they would collect the materials, and then and only then do they get to use their new character and explore. From that point, it just continued. 2.2 had the introduction of Surumi Island, where you had to do a quest to clear fog so you could explore. And Kanemiya in 2.4 had a storyline that locked mechanics like the day-night cycle. 2.7 had the chasm, where you couldn't even get to the lower area that had materials and a boss without doing a quest. And in 3.0, we had the Aranara questline. That patch had huge chunks of the map completely locked out behind different mechanics that the quest unlocks, and it also just straight up locked access to different zones based on quest completion. While I'd say some parts of the game have improved, particularly the story, the Sumeru and the Fontaine Archon quests, as well as the Jet storyline from the Sumeru Desert were very good, I can't say that the exploration has really managed to stray super far away from that newer, task-driven exploration type. And I think there's two main reasons for this. For one, what we were exploring changed. For example, in Sumeru, a lot of our time was spent underground, rather than in vast plains or on rock formations like Mondstadt and Liyue that encouraged wandering around. I mean, who knew that instead of exploring the Sumeru Desert, which is one of the biggest regions in the game based on square footage, that we'd be underground and in caves beneath it instead. Secondly, they now have world-altering events and quests like lowering the tower in the Fontaine Ordo questline, or opening up the Lost Nursery in the R&R questline. If a player doesn't do them, their version of the game is fundamentally different from others, and that's not something MiHoYo wants. So they nudge and push players along towards completing different things, instead of the player organically doing those things on their own. I'd also like to revisit the bit I mentioned earlier about upgrading our characters. At the beginning of the game, it really felt that wherever you went, you were doing something that was benefiting your characters or your account as a whole, because we were all in that new state of the game where everything mattered. We needed those sweet flowers to make sweet madams to heal in the overworld because some of us didn't even have healers. And doing a run to collect ore had meaning because everyone wanted to get a craftable weapon for their Diluc or their Kaching. Nowadays, it really doesn't feel like we have any reason to explore other than just primos, I guess? The lack of iteration on core mechanics since the game launched really does push me towards being nostalgic about how fun it was to actually increase my account's power back then. Honestly, I kind of expect this to continue even more so going forward, which is really unfortunate. From everything that we've seen about Natlan coming in just a few weeks, I can imagine the area is going to be divided into sections based on the different tribes, and I wouldn't be surprised if each tribe led you along by your nose to solve their problems, which effectively makes exploring each area pointless without having done that problem solving beforehand. And that's not even including how the character designs just don't feel Genshin anymore. Maybe it really was because the game was fresh when I had that 18-hour session, and maybe the rose-tinted glasses that I have looking back at that time are a bit stronger than I'd like to admit. But here's what I can say regardless. I haven't had the same drive, nor have I had as much fun as I did in that 18-hour session to explore and experience the game since then. While I'm still excited about the upcoming region, and I'm sure I'll enjoy it anyway, I definitely feel that the way that I look at this game now isn't the same as it was back then, because I know that every time a new region releases, my experience exploring it is going to be very similar, if not the same, to whoever else is exploring. I really miss when I could just open the game and do a long play session of wandering around to explore and find new things. I miss the vibes of ice bridging across an ocean to find a new cool thing like the hidden island in Mondstadt. I miss the feeling that no matter what I was doing, it was making my characters and my account stronger, and that meant something because we were all trying to push every little ounce of power we could get out of our terribly built characters to clear hard content like the Abyss. And since then, it's just been different, man. No game, not even Genshin itself, has really hit the same. Maybe it's burnout, or maybe those rose-tinted glasses are actually just jaded. Anyway, if you made it this far, thank you for listening to my rant, and if you liked it and you haven't already, maybe give my previous video a listen too.